Well, good afternoon, everybody. Coming to you live from Chicago, but certainly talking about what is happening in the Southeast. I'm Chip Rooster. Welcome to our Helping After Helene live stream. This is an event that we have really been working towards and honestly already getting underway throughout Nexstar Nation. I actually need to start with what exactly is Nexstar, because I know a lot of you out there are watching this on a local TV station website, and you may be saying, okay, I really am a fan of my Wood TV8 in Grand Rapids or my WSPA in Spartanburg, and going, I'm not quite sure what this Nexstar thing is. Well, like the country, every community is a part of a bigger community. So you may have your hometown, but it is part of a county or a state at that level. Well, that is how Nexstar is. We have stations across the country. In fact, I'm going to bring in a map just so you can see how many stations we have, where they're located in Nexstar. And if we start talking about the path of Helene, you can see which stations were actually impacted by that. Tampa, Florida, Panama City, Dothan, Columbus, and those in this area watching maybe even recognizing some of these stations as they pop up. And so this event, this effort, the recovery effort, it really is personal to those here at Nexstar Media Group, because it's not just about the reporting that's taking place. And that mission continues. It is about the people. It is about those in Nexstar who live in those communities and have friends and family that take part in everyday life. In fact, we may even have reporters, anchors, production members, managers in those areas that have been impacted by this. So we really do take this personal. For anybody that is watching this live stream, how can you help? I'm leading with that because it's what we're going to be talking about for the next hour. And one big way is through donations, both of time and of money. The American Red Cross, we have set up a very special, specific donation site. So if you are on a website, there's a link for you to click. If you are on YouTube, there's a link for you to click. If you're watching this in a place where you can't click a link, here's a QR code. I'm going to keep it in the bottom corner the whole time. And I said that we were already underway right here. It's refreshing every 30 seconds. There goes the update. $165,834. The current total that has been raised through this effort of our Nexstar stations and their websites and their on-air broadcasts, and that number is going to climb. You are going to help us do it over this next hour. And you know what, to lead the way, we're actually going to kick this number off quite a bit more right out of the gate here. I'm going to bring in two guests. First and foremost, sitting to my left is Joy with the American Red Cross. We will be talking to you here more in a second. But big screen, Mr. Gary Whiteman. He's our Executive Vice President of Communication and Chief Communications Officer, Gary, for Nexstar Media Group. And we are starting the live stream, what has been called a telethon. No real tele involved, but nonetheless, with some big news. Please, it's all yours, sir.
Thanks, Chip. You know, you've hit the nail on the head. Nexstar has always prided itself on its ability to be part of the communities where our businesses operate. And we have a number of employees who've been impacted by the storm in the same fashion that the other members of the community have been impacted by the storm and by Helene's aftermath. And so it's important to us to give back to the communities. That's always something we've done and something we've prided ourselves on. So today we are making a $25,000 donation from the Nexstar Media Charity Foundation to the American Red Cross, specifically designated for relief for victims of the storm, victims of Hurricane Helene. And we're really happy to be able to do that. And we're really happy, I think, from a corporate side, to be kind of pulling all our resources together and getting our television stations involved in doing this kind of fundraising, in providing a reach out to the community and giving the community a way to donate to this cause to help those who've been impacted by the storm. So we're very happy to be doing this, and I'll throw it back to you.
I appreciate that. And I think important to note, too, this number in the top corner that's been running doesn't include that 25,000. So that's just our viewers, our readers who have been making that number go up. But we can just kind of keep in mind throughout this, Nexstar throwing an extra 25K on top of that throughout this live stream.
Absolutely. We're, like I said, happy to do it, happy to be able to contribute.
Well, Gary, we appreciate you taking the time to lead the live stream that way. I'll let you go, but I'm going to bring Joy in full screen here to react to that. $25,000, that's probably a standard donation for the American Red Cross.
That's an amazing donation, and we appreciate Nexstar's efforts, both the corporate donation and then your viewers. The Red Cross can only go and support hurricane relief because of the generosity of donors. The generosity of donors makes it possible for us to be there in the face of emergency, and we are grateful, and we appreciate you hosting this event, this live stream today, to let people know about how severe and tragic this situation is.
And we're going to not only fill you all in a little bit more on what exactly those dollars are going toward, but we wanted to actually begin the true content piece of this live stream, talking about the storm itself, right? Because I know not everybody out there has been living through this, or maybe even watching all of that news. But if you are learning about Helene for the first time or want an update as to its actual impacts, we've got a team here to set you up nicely with that information. And so let me bring in, I want to make sure I'm pushing the right button. Here it is. This is two of those from WGN. So on the right is Demetrius Ivory. He's the chief meteorologist at WGN in Chicago. Bill Snyder on the left, weather producer. I call him Weather Encyclopedia because Bill knows so much, but the two of you are going to give us a sort of synopsis of Helene and its impacts.
Well, thanks for having us, and thanks for all the viewers on behalf of Bill and myself. Thanks for everyone who's putting forth their efforts to help. We've been doing this a long time, and it's rare to have a storm like this that affects so many people.
Right.
And the loss of life. I mean, this is not something that we see every year.
No, we see hurricanes, but not to the scope and breadth of damage that this path that this storm took is just. It's horrific. It really is.
So let's talk about what we were looking at going into this season. First off, and Bill, you can help me through this one.
Yeah.
We want to show you what happened in terms of the forecast there for storms there. And if we can go to Max 1.
I still have Max 2 loaded in.
We do that.
I still have Max 2 loaded into the router. They changed it on me.
Even in Chicago, we do that all the time.
Okay, I got it this time. Here we go.
All right, so name storms. I'll start with this one here. Now, this is the NOAA forecast for 2024. 17 to 25, we're probably going to get there.
Yeah, it's still a lot. Right.
Hurricanes, 8 to 13. But what you and I talked about going into this season was that everyone was kind of focusing on the top number.
Right.
And not the bottom number.
Yeah, that's the
major
one
hurricane
that hits home.
Tell people what a major hurricane is, Bill.
Major hurricane
He's the encyclopedia.
That is one that's a strong storm, like a Category 3 or stronger storm that impacts part of the lower 48, which is certainly something that Helene has just done.
Certainly did. Okay, now here's where we are right now. How about you take us through this?
Well, we're at 11 storms right now, and we certainly have more that are out there. It's the active season continues, and we're far from done. We've had 6 hurricanes and 2 major hurricanes, and again, there's every reason to believe that we're unfortunately going to get into that window of what the forecast was from NOAA at the beginning of the season.
So quieter than normal season. But we knew that that we'd have the potential for major hurricanes because of this.
Right.
First off, the sea surface temperatures.
Oh, yeah.
They're anomalously warm.
And they have been for months.
Yeah. So you're talking 80, 85 degree water temperatures.
Yeah. You really need, all you need is 80 degrees for a storm to take advantage of that energy and that warmth. And I mean, these numbers are just astounding.
Yeah. Almost
the
90
fact that
degrees.
we're in October now, and you're seeing water temperatures that in some areas are bumping close to 90 degrees. I mean, that is just bath water.
And those aren't normal. So we're going through what happened with the storm.
This is just an infrared satellite.
This is an infrared satellite. Notice how after the storm made its way on shore, it's going to kind of coil itself. It nestled under high pressure, kind of fused with a closed low pressure system. And it was basically the 1-2 punch. It was exactly what that part of the country didn't need.
That's right. Yeah, that closed low in itself was enough of a rain producer, and then you throw in Helene, and
there's the path.
And that's where you get. We're going to show you here. These are some of the wind gusts.
Let's talk about these wind gusts. Bill shows a lot of these on. I'm gonna do this one because I'm gonna give you the hard one. Peak wind gusts, Mount Mitchell, North Carolina, 106 miles per hour. Remember that the hurricane made landfall in Florida.
Right.
Okay, so you're talking, a couple states away.
Hundreds of miles away. That
it's still 106 mile per hour.
Right.
Perry, Florida, up to about 99 miles per hour. That's interesting. Frying Pan Mountain, North Carolina, 87 miles per hour. Even into Georgia, we had hurricane force winds.
Yeah.
So the winds, that damage gets the headlines, but we know
Right.
a lot of times
I mean,
it's
you
something
only
else.
need a wind gust of, technically a severe thunderstorm is classified as damaging at 58 miles per hour, and you're seeing wind gusts that are, in some cases, double that amount.
And let's talk about this here. Doppler estimated precipitation. Look here. I mean, this is 12 plus inches of Doppler
Yeah,
estimated
you see those
rain.
darker colors there. That just illustrates the amount of rainfall that fell from this storm. It's astounding
So
when you
more-
see these numbers here.
More on that in a moment, but go ahead, Bill. You take this one.
So, North Carolina has been getting all the headlines, and they certainly, with good reason, because when you see rainfall amounts such as this, we're talking rainfall in excess of 1.5 feet in many areas, and in some areas have seen 2 feet of rain.
Right.
And that's just, there's just no ground or part of the country that can absorb
Right.
that amount of rainfall. There's just nowhere.
And
Nowhere.
we've talked about, a lot of people have discussed Asheville, North Carolina.
Yeah.
That's an area that gets about 4.5 inches of rain for the month of
Yeah.
September. They got almost 18 inches of rain.
From one storm.
So the rain ended up, the storm surge, the flooding, the rain and the flooding ended up taking center stage with this storm,
And for a reason.
which can happen, especially when you're talking about a storm being lifted over the Appalachians and the Smoky Mountains.
Right.
Let's talk about how much water fell on the country. This even surprises us.
These numbers are just astounding. I mean, when you're talking 40 trillion gallons of rainfall is what fell for the storm as it moved over Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas. 40 trillion. So if you were to ask, what does 40 trillion gallons of water translate to? That is 60 million Olympic-sized swimming pools. That is enough water to fill the Dallas Cowboys football stadium 51,000 times. I mean, that puts it all into
Right.
perspective, just how much water
No community
fell with this storm.
No community in the world. And one
No.
more that jumped out to me, that it was enough water that fell just from this system, Chip, that it could have covered almost the entire state of Texas
Right.
with 1 inch of water.
Yeah.
That's a pretty large state.
That's how
Yes.
much
Yeah.
that's how much rain we got there. So
Absolutely.
those folks it's washed away towns. It's obviously changed people's lives.
Roads, people have lost their homes.
lives, so-
Yeah, it's horrible.
So thank you for being here. This storm is going to go down as probably one of our most costly storms
Ever in history.
And the
It
death
may be-
toll is just heartbreaking.
And those numbers just keep on rising. The story obviously not even yet done being told for us to know
Right.
where it ranks and the kinds of impacts out there. But the recovery operations are ongoing, which is why that we have this live stream going on today.
The need is there.
The
It
need
is,
is there.
yes.
Bill Demetrius, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for both of you taking the time to give us this synopsis. I'll let you get back because you got news here in like an hour that you need to prepare for.
We
So,
appreciate it.
Yeah,
But
no
thank
rush.
you for what you're doing. I mean, this is wonderful. There's so many people out there that are in need of help, and the fact that we're able to aid in this is wonderful. So we've got a lot. There's a lot of good people out there. And
show us what you got.
We're here to lend a helping hand. So.
There you go. Show us what you got. Thank you, Demetrius and Bill. I'll let you guys get going. And I do want to point out, actually, this number has risen by about $2,000 since we started this live stream, plus the $25 that's coming from Nexstar Corporate. So we are well on our way to having that funding to keep the Red Cross going specifically for this hurricane relief, which I do want to take a moment. Joy, you've been sitting here so nicely. Rebecca, we're coming to you after I ask Joy one question. The funds that we are working on here in this live stream in Nexstar, they're actually being directed specifically to this relief. I didn't even know that that was something you could do when you donate and actually say, no, I want the dollars that I send to the Red Cross to go to Helene hurricane relief.
Yes, Hurricane Helene is catastrophic, unprecedented, one of the most deadly storms to hit the country. And the Red Cross goes. We go in advance. We go and send people, but we rely on the generosity of the American public, of your viewers, to help us fund those efforts, to help us get the materials, the supplies, the food, the shelter to people in need. So we go, and we know the public has never failed to help the Red Cross, and we believe that they are going to help with Helene because this is really a tragic and difficult situation for so many across multiple states.
Yeah. And we've been hearing the stories coming out of that area. I mean, it's 6 to 10 states, depending on how you quantify where the need is. Obviously, a central path that hurricane traveled along, and perhaps the greatest need is along there. But we have stations, reporters, meteorologists that have been through this hurricane and others. And I want to take a few moments now to hear from one of those, and I'm going to bring in meteorologist Rebecca Berry from WFLA. So that is Tampa, Florida, for those that are unfamiliar with where WFLA is located. And Rebecca, I thank you for taking the time to join us. I know for you, covering hurricanes is nothing new, especially because you guys have the Tracking the Tropics live stream that you guys do. But I'm hoping you can give us some insight to Helene specifically. How is this compared to others you have covered and others you have experienced in the Tampa, Florida area?
And so we kept trying to let people know what they could expect in reference to Idalia, which was our most recent storm where we saw a record storm surge, because here in the Tampa area, it really was storm surge that was the issue. So when Idalia moved through, we saw record levels of storm surge, and what the predictions were coming in for Helene was about 2.5 feet above what they saw with Idalia. So we knew people that had never been flooded before were going to have flooding from storm surge. We knew that people weren't really going to understand what that was going to look like. They did call for evacuation zones. We got almost exactly what the storm surge model predicted we would see in terms of storm surge, but that meant a lot of people had a lot of water in their homes. And we were, of course, not in the path of that where the storm made its way on shore. And so we were miles and miles away from the actual center of Helene. And so I think a lot of people were surprised by the effects that we got from Helene with it being so far away. You know, we weren't Perry, Florida. Our northernmost county was still several tens of miles from where the hurricane force winds were really making impact. We got hurricane force gusts along our coast, and we had tropical storm force winds across everywhere else. Only the coastline saw those hurricane force winds, but a lot of areas saw between 4 and 6 feet of storm surge. It entered a lot of homes, even in the bay, not just at the beaches. And what we're finding out in our recovery efforts is how much sand has been displaced. And so they're taking bulldozers to clear roads from sand, much like you do up north with a snowplow.
Yeah.
But then it's making giant mountains of sand in people's driveways, so contractors can't get into those homes to help them start tearing all of the flood damaged parts out, and they can't start their recovery because they can't even get to their home because of these giant mounds of sand. So that's really unique. We haven't really seen that. We've never seen a storm surge as high as we have with Helene. And what we're learning from this there is that how to quantify what it looks like in terms of storm surge. And so I think that maybe a lot of meteorologists know what the elevation of your house is. Like, I know my house is at 15 feet. I know my road's at 12 feet. But we're in the weather office kind of coming together to find a way so that people can know how to look up the elevation of their home, because if we're calling for 4 to 6 feet of storm surge and your house is at 5 feet, you can expect water in your home. And we're trying to help people with that messaging moving forward. That's kind of been a big takeaway for the weather team here.
And that's actually what I was going to touch on, is that as a meteorologist, a big part of your job when it comes to severe weather is the prediction part. Is, hey, this is what it could be. Let us get those warnings out now so people can be prepared. Is there much that you are involved with as a Tampa, Florida meteorologist on the back end of that, or is that where you hand it off to more the news reporters and those that are heading out of the station to cover the news?
And so they like to keep us inside. They don't let us go be outside cats much in terms of reporting on the actual storm itself. But what I have been able to do is sit in our stream center here with JB while we're flying our Eagle 8 helicopter over some of the damage, even before they opened the bridges and people could, and our reporters could get to the barrier islands. We were flying over and looking at all of the cars that had been washed away, at all of the homes that had so much damage, at these, feet and feet of sand that were covering all of the barrier islands. Basically, the Gulf moved over those barrier islands, and it was contiguous into the bay. And so that's why we saw so much damage. So that's been the extent of what I've seen personally, is just from watching the chopper footage. But of course, we have really great veteran reporters here that have been going into those zones every day and finding those stories of people that have just lost everything. And it's so heart-wrenching. But I can say one thing that is unique, and because I have lived in Florida for more than half my life at this point, there's nothing quite like your neighborhood the week after a storm. Everyone's out, they're cleaning their yards up, they're assessing the damage, everyone's talking to each other. It's really the community that you wish you had year round, but everyone comes together to help each other out.
I love to hear that. I appreciate you taking the time to give us that perspective from Florida. I know we're going to hear from a colleague of yours a little bit later in the live stream. We can dig even deeper for those that missed the first part of this into Helene, its path, the what it left behind at this point. So any parting words from you before I let you go do your own television thing?
Well, the Red Cross is really near and dear to my heart. My dad is a trained Red Cross volunteer. He trains to go and set up shelters and maintain those shelters during the worst of the worst. And they go where no one else can go. They go into those disaster zones and they give people what they need. They give them shelter, food. They get them their basic needs met when it's basically the worst day of their lives. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Rebecca Berry, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on this live stream as we talk about recovering from Helene and what those not in that area can do. So I'll let you go, Rebecca, and bring Joy back up. We'll have another guest, another Next Star anchor reporter from another part of the impact zone here. But before we get to her, I want to take some time to talk to Joy because you are with the American Red Cross, and we've been talking about donations. Obviously, the main reason that we're doing this particular live stream, and I want to point out again this number. It started about $165, so we're up $5,000 since this live stream began, which I'm going to go ahead and attribute to all of those watching out here at this point. What are some of those things that those donation dollars are going toward?
Well, first, the Red Cross is 90% volunteers. People like Rebecca's father who leave their warm beds, who leave their homes, and we rely on the Weather Service and meteorologists like Rebecca to help us get some of those volunteers out into the communities in advance. We were watching Helene like Rebecca was and the other meteorologist, Demetrius, and all were in advance because we knew it was important we have people and supplies pre-positioned and in place for Helene. And because of the generosity of donors, we were able to do that. Right now on the ground, we have 1,300 volunteers like Rebecca's father with 200 more on the way across multiple states. They are providing food. They are providing water, medicines. You go out of your home, you've storm surge, you got to get out, you leave without your medications. You leave without your medical devices like walkers, canes, wheelchairs, those kinds of things. You just have to get out. But the Red Cross supplies that. We have counselors, disaster mental health counselors helping people. There are so many things that the Red Cross does in the face of an emergency, and it's because of Next Star and donors like that this can happen.
What about actual dollars equaling stuff? I know that for me, when I'm thinking about donating funds, I really like to have, if I donate $25, this is about what it will go toward. I assume you have like a breakdown list kind of going through some of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's lay that out there. Anyone that's interested in, all right, let's say I donate $5. What is that going to help with the American Red Cross?
$5 will get you a Red Cross blanket for somebody in a shelter in need, to help them keep warm. People we're welcomed at shelters, and we're there. We still have about 69, 70 shelters open right now. We've had more than 25,000 shelter stays for people.
Wow.
Last night alone, about 2,700 people, and those numbers are going up too because, North Carolina, they're just getting to people and getting them back to shelters.
Well, and talking about a blanket, depending on where you are, certainly the more north you go, we're going into fall. I'm sure in the mountainous regions, higher elevations, those can be some cold nights, even in shelters. So blankets are probably used by everybody staying in a shelter.
Absolutely, the blankets are used. You mentioned $25.
Yeah, I did.
$25 is medications on average for someone who leaves without.
You know what? Let me. I'm going to give a visual. This is a rough visual because we have the list. That's why I knew to ask about a list. But I want people to be able to see what all is involved with this. So let me get this thing pulled up real quick. Just a little bit of behind the scenes magic. Don't you worry yourself about what's happening here. And boom, there it is. Okay, so here's the list that we were just talking about. So you're saying $25. There it is. Average cost to replace those essential medications and access functional needs equipment. That was the cane as an example.
Walker, supplies that someone may need. medical supplies. So that's important. We have, healthcare professionals who are in our shelters who can help you with medication should you need that, should you forget that. We have disaster mental health counselors in our shelters. We have volunteers. I love that Rebecca's father is a volunteer because that's so typical of what the Red Cross is about. Volunteers are the backbone of the Red Cross, and these are the people who left their homes to go help others. As a humanitarian organization, we need people like her father and many others.
Well, and that's an interesting point to bring up as well. And for those that can't donate dollars, they can donate time.
Yes.
And it doesn't even have to be that you were a volunteer, an emergency services person. The Red Cross will train them to go into those areas. So I guess here's my question. Is there a need right now as well for people with this particular recovery?
There's absolutely a need for people to become volunteers. And you don't need special skills to be a volunteer. We will train you. You can go to redcross.org/volunteer and fill out an application, and you'll be contacted by your local region where you live to be a volunteer. And then they'll help you with the training and the next steps to get on staff and maybe even possibly deploy to Hurricane Helene. This is a big response, massive, and we're going to be at this for many months. We're going to need volunteers over the course of a long time, and we always welcome new volunteers, all ages, everybody, anyone who wants to come, redcross.org/volunteer.
Okay, I'm going to bring in Olivia Donnelly next, and she is one of those anchor reporters who has been out covering what the both prior to Helene coming in, but the aftermath as well. I hope that was enough verbal time for Olivia. Yes, you've unmuted. Excellent. Thank you so much, Olivia, for taking the time to join us. So anchor at 7 News, WSPA, in Spartanburg, South Carolina. How in the path is Spartanburg?
Very much so.
Okay.
When you gave us the overall map earlier of the areas that were affected, we are right in the line of path of Helene. And Friday, the entire upstate was impacted. We actually have part of our DMA, so our viewership is in Western North Carolina, and that goes for Hendersonville and Asheville as well. So outside of Spartanburg, a significant part of the people that we serve also impacted by Helene and the destruction that followed from the storm, which was absolutely horrific, as we've been mentioning.
I have to ask, because in my intro, I know you were here listening to that, I talked about how Nexstar cares because so many of our stations are in that path, and thus so many of our employees are in that path. How are you doing? How's your family and your friends in the area?
I am okay. I do not have power. I have not had power since last Friday. So we are on day 7.
Wow.
And that is there is not an employee at WSPA in Spartanburg, Greenville that has not been impacted by the storm. A lot of my coworkers, the lights are just now starting to come on. One of our directors he's from Hendersonville, and he could not get home after the storm on Friday. And he didn't know if his mom was alive until Monday, when finally crews were able to get in to confirm that she was okay. So this storm has hit much closer to home than any storm I've ever been a part of or covered, and that's been several. But I am okay. And when you look at the extent of the damages, I am beyond grateful to just be without power, because so many have lost way more than just the lights being out. And I've been able to, thankfully, through Nexstar, through 7 News, we've been able to come to the station where we have showers. There's been hot food, coffee, lights, Wi-Fi. So they have been taking care of us. And I've been very grateful for that.
Are you at all impressed with and I apologize to everyone out there that this is going to sound like hey, brag about Nexstar for a minute, but just because Olivia, you just heard her story, right? So this is me curious. Are you at all impressed with the staff that at SPA continuing through doing their jobs despite having had this impact at home? You yourself still without power a week later?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the nature of journalists in general. And I think it speaks volumes of the team that I'm a part of. And I can't say that I'm surprised at all. Many of my coworkers and colleagues without power, we just feel so helpless and are, restless. We want to get involved. How do we give back outside of just our work hours to make sure that we are contributing to the community and helping get people back on their feet? A majority of my coworkers are either, as I mentioned, without power, have a tree down in their house, nothing to the extent of what we've been seeing out of Western North Carolina. But the response has been, let's help get the word out to people. Let's make sure that we're helping contribute to the community, as we should be doing regularly anyways, and seeing how much of an impact we can make, because we know, as you mentioned earlier, we are barely scratching the surface of what we know right now when it comes to these storm numbers. We're just getting online in terms of power. Those numbers are going to be so dark and significant in the days ahead. How do we help right now to get ahead of this and try to be impactful in the response to recovery?
I of course, have to ask you, I've got Joy still sitting here with me. This whole effort is talking about supporting the American Red Cross. Have you seen the American Red Cross in action in your area?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you're outside in the community, there are crews all over working to assist. You had mentioned the blankets.
Yeah.
Already we're getting from our meteorologists weather models that suggest next week we could be in the lows of 40 degrees at night. And for a lot of people without power, that's pretty significant coming off of a summer that's been fairly hot. So these supplies are super helpful to get people just some bit of normalcy, some of the essentials that they're in need of, like you had talked about, medications, etc. Crews are on ground assisting with those recovery efforts. And it is, as Rebecca had mentioned, the community is very uplifting to see.
My last question for you, Olivia, before I let you go, and as I've been saying with everybody, get ready for your own work day, is what are the stories yet to be told? What are you guys, as the professional journalists in the area, keeping your eye on and asking the questions about as we continue to move through this recovery phase and into the rebuilding phase?
So, as I'm sure you've probably seen on social media or in the newscasts in general, the extent of the power outages, the blackout following Helene, the Greenville studios were one of those that got hard hit Friday morning. And what I mean by that is we lost power completely and much of the grid went offline. I was at work all weekend because when I go to my home, my phone goes into SOS mode and I am not allowed to make phone calls. I can't get in touch with my family. And if you think that's just in the upstate, which is already starting to see power crews on the ground, consider our neighbors in Western North Carolina, where you can't even get to some of these places because the roadways have completely washed away from the flooding, the extent of the flooding, and they can only be reached by helicopter. They're just starting to put satellites into the region so that people can try to reach out. But the stories that we are absolutely paying attention to, and we're putting boots on ground in Western North Carolina and in those areas just as impacted, if not more than the upstate of South Carolina, is because we know that the numbers that we are getting are so insignificant and so small compared to what we can expect in the coming days. And hopefully us being able to get the word out will help contribute to the donation efforts into getting these people some realm of normalcy. You have to consider Western North Carolina, the fall is when everyone flocks to the mountains because of the tourism and how gorgeous it is. And this fall ahead is going to look a lot different for our neighbors up there. So we're hoping that getting the widespread attention to the devastation and the recovery efforts that are in place can help to maybe get them somewhat back to a little bit of normalcy.
All right, Olivia Donnelly, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. Anybody out there that is interested in following as the 7 News team continues their coverage, you can always check out their website, YouTube, Facebook, all the standard things. Olivia, I really hope that you get power soon, but I'm really happy to hear that you're okay and getting by until that time that life returns to some sense of normalcy.
Appreciate it, Chip. Thank you.
Absolutely. Wow.
Yeah.
So I was set up with these different reporters, meteorologists, anchors prior to the live stream, but I honestly didn't get a chance to talk with them because all of this came together so quick. You guys don't even know the behind the scenes of this. It was like 2 days ago. They were like, hey, Chip, can we pull off a 1-hour live stream and incorporate all of these different elements? And I've just been flying since that point. So to hear that story firsthand from someone whose also job it is to go out there and tell those stories. I have to imagine it's a similar feeling for someone with the American Red Cross, that there are volunteers that, yes, go into a disaster area, but also come from a disaster area to support locally.
Absolutely. Local volunteers are a core part of, who we are. And there are people whose homes have flooded, and they are out volunteering and helping others because that's what they do. So we've heard a lot of stories about, people standing on their countertops and the water's coming up and they didn't, and it wasn't expected that it would go this far, north and be this widespread. And so these people were taken by surprise. But many of them are, also helping with the recovery effort. We're working with first responders, and many of them were impacted. These are people that give for others. They're all humanitarians and full for their support and for people being there for others in need.
And we are grateful for everyone out there that is choosing to donate at this time. I'm trying to, there it goes, make this thing go full screen. So we've been talking about the donation effort. This is a QR code for those that prefer that or are watching in a place where you need a QR code and you can't click on one of the hyperlinks that we have going on. But the cool thing with this particular effort that we are doing here is it is not only designated for Hurricane Helene recovery, but it is totaling up very specifically all of the donations that are happening across Nexstar. So this website, this QR code, that is what this running total is. So all of you out there who are our Nexstar viewers and readers, you have led to a $173,774 donation up to this point, plus the 25. So we're approaching a $200,000 donation from our viewers and our corporate level team to this effort. We talked a little bit ago about what those dollars go towards: $5 for a blanket, $8 for a comfort kit with hygiene items and a blanket, $842. That was at the bottom of the list. You know what? Let me just bring it back up real quick. That bottom of the list, I guess you can't see it until I push this button right there. $842 provides food and shelter for a family of 4 for 5 days, which, hearing from Olivia just then, that sounds like it is a huge need right now, just the shelter aspect of what's going on.
Absolutely. The shelter aspect's very important because it gives people a safe place where they can have food, where they can rest, where their family can be, and they, can use their phone. They can talk to others who are experiencing the same situation, talk to Red Cross volunteers. It's really that comfort and care aspect of, a safe place to go. And that's part of what the Red Cross does.
I have to imagine, when we talk about the hierarchy of needs, food, water, clothing, shelter, that is what you all are really geared at getting to people in this moment.
Absolutely. You have to handle the immediate needs first. We're also doing other things, like we have reunification efforts. If somebody has a loved one they haven't heard from, during this situation, they can go to redcross.org/Helene or call 1-800-RED-CROSS and let people know about that person. And we have caseworkers who will work with them on trying to reunify them with their loved one.
That is a great message, because this live stream is going out to, I showed that map earlier, and I can bring it back up again in a little bit. I want to get to our next guest, who's a reporter literally on the ground right now, getting ready to show us what's happening around her. But for those that are watching this outside of the impact area, and you have someone that you haven't been in contact with, there's a potential resource there for you as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have Ansley Daniel standing by. I'm going to bring her in now by pushing this button. There we go. Anchor at News Channel 11, ABC Tri-Cities, which is WJHL, Johnson City, Tennessee. Ansley, not only anchor, but in the field, I can see you. Where are you? What is happening right now behind you?
Yeah, so actually, I'm going to flip the camera around so you can see what's in front of me.
Oh, in front of you,
This
yeah.
is Interstate 26 here in the Tri-Cities. As you can tell, there is a ton of debris. This interstate is totally washed out on down there. You can't really see it from here. We have been back there. We've been escorted back there, but I can't get back there just by myself right now.
Sure.
But just take a look at all of this debris. 26 is like this all the way from this point in Northeast Tennessee up and through the Carolinas. Now, we are very, very close to the North Carolina border from where I'm standing. I'd say I'm about, a 30 to 45-minute drive on a good day. But this has absolutely rocked this little town in our viewing area. But unfortunately, this is not the only part of our viewing area.
Yeah.
A good portion of it, most of our major counties have been impacted by Helene.
Ansley, I gotta say, so for anyone that's like, oh, that video picture is kind of meh, and like the audio is a little off every here and there, you're on your phone right now, so you have some kind of communications, but you're also fairly rural. Is this something that you could have accomplished even 2 days ago at this point?
Potentially from this area, we are close enough to Johnson City,
Okay.
which is kind of the main hub. But it would have still been rough. And I would say right now things are probably difficult simply because everybody's being rerouted through this little town here. So a lot on their phone and trying to get around the interstate debacle that we're facing right now. Communication, like you said, has been tough. We have a lot of little areas that are completely cut off from the main part of their community, from the main part of the county. Some folks not even reachable besides an ATV or a four-wheel drive vehicle.
Wow.
Some of them in the beginning could only be accessible via Black Hawk helicopter.
I'm sure, too, that not everybody has been able to reestablish connection, whether that be a physical connection, being able to exit wherever they are, their homes, get back to their homes, or even one by communication. So that's a story that Olivia brought up as well. I'm curious if you're experiencing the same thing in your area, that there are still unaccounted for people.
Yes, absolutely. There are lots of folks that are unaccounted for. A lot of us know people who have been impacted by this storm, whether it be damage or they are currently looking for loved ones. So that's been really difficult to cover because obviously, we've lived in these communities. Personally, I've been here for 5 years now. So a lot of these folks that I cover and in these communities are my friends. And then to see them looking for loved ones has been difficult. But we do hope that as more cell towers are brought in and that as communication up, that those missing numbers will go down. However, we also know that on the other end, right now, the death toll is kind of low. And so we are concerned that that's going to rise.
Yeah. So I've got 2 questions that I asked Olivia, but I definitely have to ask you these same 2 questions as well. You just mentioned it. You've been a resident there for a number of years. Were you impacted? How are you doing in the aftermath of Helene?
So thankfully, I'm very fortunate where I live in Johnson City and where our main station is, where most of the folks at WJHL obviously saw the rain coming in. There was a few down trees, but we all, knock on wood, and very thankfully have had power throughout. We have all had water throughout this. We are being asked to conserve water now, but thankfully we have not water. Now, I know folks that are personally impacted in other counties. A friend of mine was actually doing swiftwater rescue here. He came back and everything in his house was gone. He had 8.5 feet of water in his house. I've got another friend that lives in the county without water. She doesn't, she's got kids. And so that's really difficult. And then there were, countless other folks at the station that place, or still looking for, loved ones of loved ones. So a lot of us have been touched or, know folks personally impacted by this storm.
And then that other question I wanted to ask, I've got Joy sitting next to me, one of the national spokespeople for the American Red Cross, is have you seen the American Red Cross in action within your viewing area?
Yes, I have. Now, I have not seen them here in Irwin where I'm currently at, but I do know that they are here via video. And my colleagues that have been out here, I did see some of them yesterday at Elizabethton High School in Carter County. That's one of the neighboring counties here, and of course in our viewing area. We do know that they're there. We saw them yesterday. They met with the government. They were coordinating efforts there. I know they're on the ground in other counties as well, but yesterday they were coordinating the shelter there. They were coordinating meals, not only for the folks in the shelter, but also the volunteers in and around the high school. That was kind of the, the main operation area. So they were starting to, do some coordination for the volunteers and the folks impacted. And I think that you did mention earlier, I was able to listen in just a teeny bit.
Yeah.
A lot of those folks are local, and they also have been impacted by this in various ways. Maybe they're without power, maybe they're without water, but yet they are still out here giving back and signing up for these shifts to be able to help their community, which is really incredible.
Amazing. Well, Ansley Daniel, who's literally checking in with us from being on the job and reporting, I'm going to let you get back to your story of the day. I hope anyone out there that is interested in continuing to watch your coverage checks out News Channel 11. You don't have to be local, everybody. That's why the internet exists. If you want to get the local story, go to the local website. Ansley, thanks so much.
Thank you.
There it was. I was going to say, I'm going to assume she said thank you because we've had that delay going on there. So hearing stories on this live stream, wherever you're watching, but I just mentioned it. Nexstar as a company has stations all across the country. In fact, this is a great time to go ahead and bring that map back in. Let me bring that map back in. Here you go. If you didn't know, Nexstar owns and operates 200 different TV stations, 116 U.S. markets. And so hopefully we are catching every single one of these right now where people are watching and letting you guys know that there is a way for you to help. I've noticed that my cool little live contribution bug is not updating, but that's okay because I have the website right here so I can do a live check-in. And we are up to $174,034. We started at about $165. So just in the course of these 45 minutes, yes, Jeff, I see your reaction face. In the course of these 45 minutes, we've raised almost $10,000. Now, I know there's a big effort going on there across all Nexstar stations, so I can't necessarily attribute it just to the live stream. But Joy, I'm going to. Okay. Because we're here and we're putting this on and getting the message out as best we can across all of these different areas in the United States there. And my little thing started updating again. I want to take a moment, Joy, before we bring in our last on-the-ground guest, who is the chief meteorologist out of Tampa at WFLA, just to ask you a bit more about the recovery effort as seen by the Red Cross. And here I have the photo slideshow, the other one, and then the video to talk about. You yourself, you're stationed up here with me, but you have colleagues down there, obviously a number of volunteers. Could you give us some of those numbers, some of what the American Red Cross has seen throughout the affected area?
We have a lot of colleagues. As I said, we've got about 1,300 on the ground now, volunteers. We sent about 40 some from the Chicagoland, Illinois area, and that repeated itself through states all across the union. Everyone wants to help. We've also got a lot of local volunteers, as we've talked about, and what they're doing. They're driving emergency response vehicles into communities where they can't get out and giving them food and water and supplies. We've got 137 of these emergency response vehicles on the ground. I see you've got the video up of one of them.
You basically called for it. You're a pro, Joey.
Yeah, that one, those are actually local people from Chicago that I know in that video. That gentleman is one of our great volunteers who also responds to house fires, but goes into disasters and helps people. We're there providing assistance to people where it's needed and when it's needed. It's the Red Cross works with community organizations. We're in every community that we can be. We work with county officials, state officials, other organizations, other nonprofits to get people what they need. That's an effort that was taking place in Florida. I believe maybe it was Cedar Key. There was so much that's been going on in this disaster, and it's very widespread, and we have people all across the impacted states, hundreds of miles.
I'm going to take a moment to do one thing that I've kind of been waiting just to see what happens here. So not only are we live streaming across Nexstar station websites, as well as Facebook pages, by the way, KXAN in Austin helped me out with that. Thank you, Kate. But also 11 different YouTube channels. So we have, I believe, 5 or 6 from the impacted area and then 5 or 6 of our largest just to try and get that reach going out there. And I've actually had this neat function enabled where I can see comments as they come in. And there are a couple of comments that I certainly want to bring in just to note. So Photos by Meta noting that their house, why did you go away? Come back. Their house in Boone was totally destroyed by a landslide. And so we have people who are watching this live stream in impacted areas at the moment. There was another one I saw. We were talking about the different places that we can watch. And so we had some people checking in. Nancy watching Channel 5 KTLA in LA and noting that prayers to those hit by the hurricane. And Nancy, a lot of positive comments in this live stream on KTLA's YouTube channel. So we appreciate her and others jumping in to leave some comments. I hope also anyone watching is clicking some of those links, maybe using this QR code to go and add to that growing number of donations that you, our Next Star viewers and readers, are able to contribute at this point. So that's the big one, but I keep it in the bottom part of the screen, and it's this number right here. That website, those contributions are updating that number, 174,684, where we're at now, started about 165 50 minutes ago. And we want that to keep going even after this live stream is over. Now, I have a lot of video of some of that impact, but before I bring that video in, I would like to bring in our last on-air guest, and that is Chief Meteorologist. I feel like I need a drum roll, Jeff, to bring in a Chief Meteorologist here. But I appreciate you taking the time. Jeff, yes, that happened. I'm using, for some behind the scenes, I'm also the tech person, and I'm using the exact same, it's called a source, to bring Jeff in as I brought Gary in. And while I changed the name, I forgot to change the source. So now, boop, 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 click, and boom, there's Jeff. Hi, Jeff.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. So we talked to WGN meteorologists who gave us a nice synopsis of the storm itself. We had Rebecca on earlier talking about what it's like to be a meteorologist in a hurricane area, mentioned tracking the tropics, a lot of the stuff that you guys do. I was hoping, though, to get a sort of comparison just based on your own knowledge and experience. So no worries about being perfectly accurate by the books, but just your opinion. How has Helene been as far as an impact goes in the Tampa area, in the Florida area, and even all along its path?
I was just saying to Rebecca that in my career, I think this may be the most impactful of all hurricanes that I've ever seen. And that's because it hit not just the area that you typically expect hurricanes to hit, which is the coast, right? Or kind of a confined area.
Yeah.
But this storm brought devastation all up and down its path in a way that I think was very surprising to everyone. It was surprising for people in the Tampa Bay area to have 7 feet of surge when the storm center was 100 miles off the coast. I talked to people locally here, and I said, is there anything I could have said that would have convinced you how bad it was? And they said, no, you couldn't have, because the storm was 100 miles off the coast. So they are just used to what the impacts are for a storm that's, the center of the storm so far away. And when it came to the Carolinas, we saw that train wreck coming as meteorologists. We knew that this was going to be a devastating flood for the Carolinas. I don't think we could picture how devastating it would be, but we knew that it was going to be very bad. And again, the folks there would have never expected this because they don't have any experience with hurricanes. So I would say that this was probably, and for many, it will go down in the history books as the most impactful hurricane in modern history to hit the United States. Not the strongest, but I would say the most impactful because it impacted such a large swath of people who just didn't expect it to have the impacts that it did.
Well, and I'm glad that you brought up kind of a bit of a comparison, not the strongest per se, but it was unique in the longevity that it had, and more importantly, the areas that it hit. So a lot of the video that I have is from the North Carolina. We keep bringing up Asheville because of that tremendous amount of rain. Was that expected going into this?
Yes, to a degree. In fact, some of us thought there would be potentially 20 to 30 inches of rain. That's what happened. Actually, Doppler radar estimates say that up to 40-ish inches of rain fell in some of the mountain peaks. We've seen this happen a few times over the past 100, 150 years where tropical systems slam into the mountains. They dump all their rain. So this has happened before, but probably not quite to this degree. I was just looking at a map from the National Weather Service showing that this was a 1 in 1,000 year flood, or really, in some cases, it was probably a 1 in 10,000 year flood. But usually when we see 1 in 1,000 year floods, it means that in any 1 year, there's a 1 in 1,000 chance that you would see it in that local area.
Gotcha.
Usually when we see it, it's the size of a city. That these really huge floods are typically restricted to very small areas. But in this case, it was a huge, colossal area of the likes that I've never seen before that experienced the kind of flood that you should only experience once every 1,000 or 10,000 years if you were living in that spot for that long, if you could live for that long, just to give you an idea of how rare this is. But, we're seeing these kind of floods more often because the atmosphere is warmer, the oceans are warmer, there's just a lot more water vapor in the atmosphere, a lot more moisture. And so, it takes what could be a destructive and damaging hurricane and makes it a devastating hurricane. Unfortunately, we're seeing this happen more often.
Well, let's touch on the science part of that just a skosh, because this was one, I haven't been a huge hurricane watcher. I did live in Tampa for 2 years. So I have a little bit of like, oh, I need to know what the flood zones are, that kind of thing. But this one went, and it was predicted to be this way, from next to nothing to a category 4 before making landfall. Is there any precedence for the amount of intensity that it gained in such a short period of time?
Sure. It's not all that uncommon, but we're seeing it happen a lot more over the past couple of decades or so, that these storms will go from Cat 1 to Cat 4 intensity really quick. In fact, this gained about 50 to 55 miles an hour of intensity within about 24 hours. So that's not abnormal, but it doesn't make it any better because, you know, it was intensifying right up to the coast. And that's something that we're seeing a lot more often, too. A lot of studies have been done, and we find that these storms have a tendency nowadays, in the past decade or two, to intensify more when they get to landfall. So that means they maintain their intensity at landfall further inland, and they carry that momentum and all that extra water vapor. In fact, the amount of moisture that was brought north to the Carolinas was about 1.5 times the record. So it was not just record-breaking, but it was a record-shattering amount of moisture, and our records go back to 1940 for this particular area. So there's a lot more moisture being carried north because water temperatures are in the Gulf are about 3 degrees Fahrenheit higher than they should have been. They were at record numbers. So again, you know, it's just everything seems to be getting more intense, and the impacts are becoming a lot more intense, and the economic damage is becoming a lot higher as well.
All right. Well, Jeff, any parting words for our viewers? Again, this is a drive to hopefully get some people to be contributing to the American Red Cross, setting you up just a little bit there. Go ahead, sir.
The lives of these people will never be the same. I've worked in places where Hurricane Andrew hit, and people for the rest of their lives will talk about their lives. This moment is an inflection point, you know, before Andrew and after Andrew. And these people who were affected by the storm will say before Helene and after Helene. Their lives will really never be the same. It's going to take them years for their lives to be back to normal. So I would say if you have it in your heart and in your wallet, please donate.
All right, Jeff, thank you so much for taking that time. I'll bring that QR code up big one more time. And you're clear, Jeff, no worries. So for those that are looking to add their dollars to the donation total, we have options. There's the QR code. If you're watching on your local Next Star Station website, that story has the direct link. If you happen to be watching on one of the YouTube channels, those have pinned comments with the link as well as in the description. And then we also have this going out on multiple Facebook pages. So a lot of different avenues for you to get to that donation link and give what you can. We are updating to 175, 134, started 57 minutes ago at about 165,000. So over the course of an hour, $10,000 plus another 25 from Nexstar Corporate at this point. These dollars, American Red Cross is already on the ground.
Yes.
And so this is about sustaining your operations until the need is no longer needed. Is there any kind of estimate, any kind of timeline when it comes to that kind of thing?
Well, we are in a mode of continuous response. There were 3 hurricanes that hit Florida, you know, just this season so far, including Helene. There are wildfires on the West Coast. We're responding continuously, and we will be responding to Hurricane Helene as long as it takes. Every dollar counts. Every donation is important because we will continue to stay, we will continue to be there, and we will continue to help people in this crisis. This has changed people's lives forever. People are hurting. This is really horrific for so many. And oftentimes these storms hit, you know, the same people over and over again, right? The climate crisis has caused so many more intense storms.
Yeah.
As Demetrius and all have said, you know, the water of the Gulf is very warm, and that sparks more storms and makes it, you know, difficult for people to recover again and again. I deployed to Ian, you know, just 2 years ago and saw so many homes that were leveled and devastated, and people who, you know, had retired, this was their life savings.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's hitting oftentimes many of the same people over and over again, many of the same communities, and we are in the communities. We're there to help people, and we're proud, so proud of the volunteers who go and help, and we'll be there as long as we're needed.
And for those that haven't been seeing the video, I've been putting some up here. I'm going to do something kind of funky just because my friend in Tampa is sending it to me. This is going to have Jeff's name on it, but what you're looking at is some video. We had Rebecca Berry on earlier talking about the storm surge and how much sand it brought with it. Wow. So this is video from I believe they call it Chopper 8, but WFLA's helicopter. And you can see the piles of sand that Rebecca was describing, almost as if these homes were built directly on the beach. I saw earlier, he was sending me the same feed, plows going through, as Rebecca was telling us too, to set it to the side. So there you go, as it sort of zooms out. That is just one of those impacts. I've also been bringing up other impacts here. So this rural mountain communities, we've been talking about this, and the amount of rain, 40 trillion gallons total that Helene dropped. And the type of impact that it's having, I think Jeff put it the best. You said it in a very similar way, that this storm is having such an impact on people's lives that it is a true turning point in their life, that they will refer to times before that storm and times after that storm. And right now, the after that storm is still very real. There's so many people that still need help, whether they don't have power. As we heard from one of our Next Star anchors, they still don't have power, whether their homes were washed away, whether they're still looking for their friends and family. And the American Red Cross is doing its part to be there to get those base needs served while recovery continues and eventually rebuilding begins. So here's that QR code one more time. We're about to wrap up this live stream, but know that even though the live stream is ending, the effort is not ending. Our Next Star stations, this live link is going to continue, and we will keep trying our best to help you guys, the American Red Cross, help those in need, which, as I've stated, includes many of our own. So one last check-in here for our current contributions number, which, like I said, has gone up about $10,000 since we began this live stream. And then, Joy, I also wanted to give you just one more moment for some final words before we end this effort right here.
We're grateful to Next Star and your viewers for making a difference to people in need. The Red Cross is proud to say that 90 cents on every dollar 90 cents on every dollar goes to serving those in need, goes to the support and programs of people in need. And whether it's $5 for a blanket or $25 for medication, whatever you can give, it's appreciated, and it will go to those who are impacted. And there are so many people impacted right now. Our hearts go out to them. We will be there to help them. We'll continue to have volunteers and team members there to help people in need. So thank you. Thank you. You were right, Hurricane Helene. People will think about their lives before and after Hurricane Helene.
Joy, thank you for taking the time to join us on this live stream, talk a little bit about what the American Red Cross has been doing. This effectively concludes the broadcast portion of this live stream, but again, this does not conclude the fundraising portion. And so we implore anybody out there, whatever you can give, 5, 10, 25, maybe that 842 to help a family of 4 have 5 nights of shelter. Now is the time, because the American Red Cross is already on the ground, and we need to help them help those in need. On behalf of Next Star Media Group and Joy and the entire team that put this live stream on, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for whatever it is you can give to help continue the recovery effort.